I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler this week after Texas A&M. We are late to the party in our post-game analysis with Texas A&M here. Will, everyone's had theirs out by now. We had a couple conflicts earlier in the week. This was the best we can do to get this out. And I gotta say, I was not heartbroken that we had a few days to digest this. This is something that without sometimes when you're closer to the moment, you're a little more raw, a little more maybe a little more negative at times. That Miami episode was pretty bleak that we did a couple weeks ago, so it's good to have a little bit of time to digest it. It doesn't really make it a lot better. Doesn't make it a lot better what happened. 310 yards rushing to a team with their backup quarterback, 488 overall. Will, I've done this exercise the last couple years. I started doing it with the 2022 Tennessee loss because I remember watching the game and thinking, if we had no defense on the field, what would be the difference between what we saw and literally no defense on the field? And it wasn't much. The exercise wasn't much. So I did the same thing here with this A&M game. And we gave up in the first half, we gave up 277 of the possible 321 yards Texas A&M could have gained. That's 86% of the total yardage they could have gained from the start of their drives to the end of their drives. They had four scoring drives, two field goals, two touchdowns, two drives over 90 yards, a 92 and 99-yard drive, 86% of the total yards in that first half. And then the second half, it didn't get much better. Of course, you open with the big pass, the blown coverage, 75-yard touchdown. And then luckily, you finally had a punt, a couple of missed field goals. But overall for the game, Will, 439 of the 573 total yards they could have gained in those first 8 drives. I'm not counting the ninth drive because the ninth drive was just them running the ball down our throats one more time to run out the clock. So we won't even have to count that. So that's the total yardage. 75% of the total yardage in the 8 drives of actual gameplay. Texas A&M did what they wanted when they wanted to. This just took the swamp right out of it. It was a massive deficit from the beginning, and the offense barely saw the ball in the first half. So I would love to talk about how the quarterback rotation was handled, but honestly, it's just such a non-factor when your defense is that bad and getting pushed around that horribly in the first half that there's really nothing to discuss except the defense.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a complete non-factor because this felt a lot like Kentucky last year, where Florida's defense couldn't get a stop, but Florida's offense didn't do anything to help. And then you look up at the end of the game, you go, "Well, the offensive stats aren't terrible," but the problem is that you're down 20-0 or 24-0 or 27-10 before the offense even shows any semblance of life. And look, I mean, it's not like the offense played well. It's just that the defense is so bad that and we've been saying for years. In fact, this offseason, you and I would joke that we weren't allowed to say that the defense will get better. It has to get better just because it can't be that bad. And it turns out they keep one-upping themselves because the Gators are now 122nd in yards per play allowed to FBS opponents at 7.2. Last year, they were 124th at 6.5. And 2 years ago with Patrick Toney, they were at 5.9. They were 105th overall in the country. So it turns out that out of the last three defensive coordinators, Patrick Toney is the best. And they make Todd Grantham look like Dick LeBeau. Like, I mean, I am like jonesing for a bad Todd Grantham defense right now. And that's pretty hideous. And, I mean, look, when Anthony Richardson was the quarterback and the defense was bad, the games were at least entertaining. But when Graham Mertz is the quarterback and the defense can't stop anybody, you just get blown out of the water. And that's what happened against Miami. And obviously the Mertz and Lagway alternating drives didn't work well either. And you get blown out of the water by Texas A&M. And so I don't know what's going to happen in this game against Mississippi State. I mean, you got Napier saying, "Oh, well, the first road game." Oh, you see, it's like, well, it wasn't for Miami or Texas A&M. Like they came out and beat the shit out of you. So I don't know what I don't know what well, I have an idea of what's going to happen. Mississippi State's really bad, But it turns out Florida's really bad too. And that's kind of a depressing place to be because I think you and I both looked at it. We write our preseason magazine and that gets us enthused and probably overly optimistic for these sorts of things. But I mean, at the end of the day, we both were picking them. I think I picked them 6-6. What'd you have them, 7-5? Somewhere in that
Yeah.
range.
Yep. 7-5.
And so we're sitting there going, it's going to be a middling team. There's going to be some ups and going to be some downs. And I mean, I guess this team can still get to 6-6, but with the schedule that's coming and the way they've looked in games against real opponents,
To
it's
say,
it's hard to imagine them
not the
getting
team
anywhere
we've
near
seen
that.
so far. Not the team we've seen so far. That
Well, I mean,
team's not
half of
getting
them
a
are on
six
the
six.
injured list, so that doesn't help either. But
Yeah, well, I don't think the injured list is the problem. It kind of happened from the jump here with this group here so far. So I listen. I mean, you look at the roster, this is the biggest indictment of what's coming here. Here, let's going into the very end of the Billy Napier era. When it's going to be, who knows? It's going to be either, whether it's next week, whether it's in 3 weeks, whether it's in a month. It's coming in the near future, right? We're not too far from the end of it, but the non-competitive nature, use the same word after the Miami game, just the non-competitive nature of this game in your home stadium against a first-year program in Texas A&M, the team that had flipped it around. You're going into year three. It's just such a terrible look on your own home field to get beaten that badly, and just no pulse, no sign of life. And Will, we talked about the rotating quarterback strategy, right? And again, you do mention the offense did not help in the first half. Well, if your quarterbacks are struggling to get a rhythm, at least you have two of them to not get a rhythm, right? You go back and forth between two guys that aren't getting a rhythm, which puts a little more pressure on them when they go out each time. You look at the strategy there. Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway on the game. Mertz finishes 12 of 15 for 195 yards, completed a couple big passes here and there, but one TD, one pick six. Lagway throws one TD, two interceptions, 54 yards, 6 of 13 passing. Lagway just looked like it never got a chance to get in rhythm. The two INTs, by the way, at the end of each half, one of the INTs was a inexplicable drive at the end of the half where it ended up with a Hail Mary in the end zone. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a Hail Mary with fewer receivers in the end zone. Like not even just in the area, Will, but in the end zone where the ball needs to go on a Hail Mary. But my big issue is you look at it, and I think this really sums up Napier's mindset and where we're at as a program. Well, at halftime, the reporter asked Napier going in the locker room, will we see a similar strategy with both QBs in the second half? And Napier replied, yeah, absolutely. Very similar. Very similar. We're down 20-0. We just had four horrible drives, four terrible drives down 20-0. Yeah, absolutely. Very similar in the most assured way possible. That is a time for a sound bite. That's a time to really kind of lay into something, say something. I know that's not Napier style. We're never going to get that from Napier, but to just have total assurance that yeah, no adjustments are on the way. That said a lot about the approach to this game and really what's ultimately going to be the downfall of Billy Napier at Florida.
I mean, I think it says a lot about the approach to his regime, right? The approach to this era is that we've been critical of his slowness to adapt to recruiting and name, image, and likeness. We've been critical of his slowness to adapt to the transfer portal. We've been critical of his slowness to adapt to having special teams coaches who can go out there and fix the special teams. It's interesting. Dave Wonderlick had a good article over Gator Country earlier this week detailing all the coaches and all the players who've come over from Louisiana and who's actually been successful. And it's basically Jabbar Jalouk and Osiris Torrance. And other than that, the guys that have come over, I mean, you got Patrick Toney. Obviously, he was a bust. You got Austin Armstrong. They're not looking great. You got Ron Roberts. Hasn't improved there at all. You got
Mm.
Rob Sale. They're on the offensive line. You got all of these different guys who've come in and just haven't really made a contribution. The interesting thing is when they went and got Houston from New England to come in and be the special teams coach, special teams have actually been pretty good this year. But I mean, it's one
Yeah,
of the
two of those 90+ yard drives, nice punts by Crawshaw inside the 10-yard line.
well, and the defense did a great job of taking advantage of it. But
Right.
I so there's a couple things there. One is that it's really easy in hindsight to say alternating quarterbacks is stupid. But I have the benefit of being on a bunch of podcasts throughout the week. And before the game, Gator Dave asked me on Gators Breakdown whether an every other drive rotation of those two would satisfy me, and I said no. Like it would be worse than just starting Mertz, and I thought he should start Lagway, but it'd be worse than just starting Mertz and sticking with him. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is those guys split first team reps throughout the week. So instead of getting your starting quarterback ready for Texas A&M, you hedged and you sat there and had both of those guys getting first team reps throughout the week. So if DJ Lagway looked unprepared, it's because he was. It's because you put him in a situation where he was going to struggle to succeed because he hadn't gotten all the first team reps.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a problem. But the bigger problem is that you have to be able to make hard decisions to be a successful CEO or a successful leader. And, you know, I had a couple of people reach out to me afterwards and they were like, well, Steve Spurrier rotated his quarterbacks. I'm like, yeah, but he
Yeah.
didn't rotate them every other drive. And he didn't make sure they got equal time. They didn't get participation trophies. One of the guys he yanked off the field eventually won a Heisman Trophy. So, like, these are excellent players who are out there who are getting yanked in and out based on did you please the coach, and you're going to be held accountable for whether you please the coach. Not there's 40 seconds left in the half and it's your turn. Here's your little medal and you can go out on
Right.
the field and we'll give you Skittles afterwards and a little star to put on your helmet when you're done. Like this ain't little league. This isn't Pop Warner. Like at some point one of these guys won the job. You and I can debate because we're not in practice who was the guy who won the job, but somebody won the job. And that's the guy who should have played. And when you're not willing to make those hard decisions, it means you can't be an effective leader. And to me, that alternating the quarterbacks is a symptom of the things that we've seen. Look at all the staff members who have not performed and have been demoted but have not been let go. Look at all the players who have gone out there and struggled when they've gone on the field and they have not corrected it or pulled them off the field. Look, if the left tackle's a turnstile or the right tackle's a turnstile or the middle linebacker can't make a tackle or the safety is giving up blown coverages, we as fans can look, we as analysts can look and say, we think that guy might be responsible, but who's responsible. Pull that guy off the field, put Cormani McClain in, pull that guy off the field, put whoever Joey Slackman's backup is, right? Like maybe it's worse. It might be worse. But can it be worse? They're giving up 90% of the on defense, especially. They're giving up 90% of the total yards they could have given up if there was no defense. Like, what are we talking about here? And then the other thing is I had a couple people reach out because obviously you and I were pretty strong. I especially was really strong saying I thought Lagway should be the starter. And it was like, well, Mertz earned the job after this one. They had 73 freaking yards of offense in the first half.
Yeah.
And two of the three real drives were with Graham Mertz in charge. So no, like Mertz against a defense that basically was disinterested in the second half after the bomb that A&M hit to respond to Florida's first touchdown. Essentially, that game was over at the half, 20-0. Florida comes down, gets the throw, gets the throw to Badger that's off. Right. And Badger kind of tips it to himself, takes it to the house.
Right.
Florida, of course, somehow manages to get a holding penalty down by the goal line to keep it out. They get the touchdown throw to Badger, and then boom, 2 plays later, A&M's down there in the touchdown for a touchdown with a busted coverage. But again, I go back to 73 yards in the first half, 66 yards passing. That's not big time SEC quarterback play. I don't care if you're alternating drives. If you're the 6th-year senior, you're the guy who's supposed to be able to manage the alternating drives. So I didn't think, yes, when you look at the overall tape, I think you would say, well, if you factor in the second half, Graham Mertz played better than DJ Lagway. But let's be honest, they both stunk in the first half. The defense stunk in the first half. The play calling stunk in the first half. And if they call one more first down run out of the pistol, I might lose it. They run that play 65 to 70% of the time out of the pistol. It's a dead tell for the defense to know what's coming. They did this. They did it for Mertz on the first play of the game, and they wound up like second and 11. They did it for Lagway on his first
Right
play of the
before the
first
weather
drive,
delay.
and they end
Yeah.
up at second and 12.
Yeah.
And so, if you want to talk about setting up your quarterback for success, how about a little hitch to gain 5 or 6 yards, an easy throw where all of a sudden, he just sort of picks the spot in the zone. Because you know what they're doing when you're in the pistol on first down? They're firing forward to stop the run. You have the ability to hit a little pass past the linebackers. We don't do that. What Florida does is they either hand it off to Montrell Johnson or Tran Webb, or they run a play action where they've got a flood coming across the field. And if your offensive line can't hold up for that to develop, or if you've got a young guy who isn't necessarily going to go read one, read two, read three, then you got to help them out a little bit. I didn't think they did a very good job of that either. So if you can't tell, I'm not real pleased with the way the game went. Um, but I think some of the narratives coming out of it are probably misguided, given the first half domination. This was definitely the first half is what you should use to evaluate the teams, and the second half was A&M just making sure they didn't screw it up, right? I mean, that was one where they're like, all right, we'll back off and make you go, you know, 8 plays in 7 minutes, and you score a touchdown, whatever. We'll score a touchdown in 30 seconds anyway, going the other direction. And even if we don't think you have the firepower to come all the way back. I mean, think about that, right? If A&M hadn't scored in the second half, this is just a tie game, and that's with A&M's defense playing like ultra soft. So the idea that second half really tells us anything, I am dubious that second half is anything other than stat padding for both teams, quite honestly.
As someone, I'm wearing the Jaguar hat for a reason, Will. We're in Jags mode here. We're in Jags mode. I saw Blake Bortles put up a lot of garbage time passing yards back in the day when we were down by 3 scores that you feel like you saw something on that drive, and then the next week it just looks the same. You come out, it looks the same. But I'll tell you, again, I think seems like a great guy. We know what he is at this point, and we know what he's not. This defense needs a quarterback that could have the potential to score about 40 a game if we're going to win. If we're going to win. We know Mertz is not that guy. If we had a top 5 defense and we needed a quarterback just to manage the game and not make a lot of mistakes, Mertz would have a much stronger argument. He'd have a much stronger argument in that case, but you need a chance. You need a chance with a guy that out there that can actually move the ball in some explosive manner at times. And we don't have a bunch of 9-play, 6-minute drives in us. It's just not the type of offense we need to be in order to win football games. But hey, I guess the answer we're going to get is yeah, absolutely, very similar for next week too. So
Working on the scout team, buddy. Working on the scout team.
The scout team, right? That was the issue. It was the scout team. Something was the issue on that, but just the lack of it, the lack of adjustments in game continues to. It shouldn't, but it continues to boggle my mind, and we're just at a point where, you can't do this at the University of Florida. You can't be this bad. You can't be this again. I put that in the magazine specifically. 82% of this roster is Napier's. 82% of this roster is Napier's. I put that in that magazine specifically because it's year 3. It's year 3. This is a point where we were expecting a step forward this year. With the schedule, we thought, 8-9 wins would be awesome. Which, how many years do you ever say that at Florida? That's not a statement you hear a lot at Florida. But standards are just have been so. Our expectations are so lowered right now that we would kill for an 8 or 9 win season this year. It's something that I haven't seen in a long time. I keep thinking the phrase that keeps coming to my mind is it just feels like shades of 79 watching this team. We got the win against Sanford, so we're not going to go over, but we're heading into what we're going to find here is the transfer portal era is especially brutal in a turnover, and I don't know who's going to be finishing the season with this team. I think there's a legitimate question there on who's going to what players are not just coaches, which players are going to be finishing the season with this team. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes from here, but I do think you have to lean toward guys that are going to obviously you want to have the guys on the field. If Graham Mertz was the guy to give you the best chance to win, I'd say play Graham Mertz. I just don't think he's that guy. So on the offensive side, you got to give Lagway a shot. And if you're Napier at this point, man, what do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? Just go out and have some fun. Let the kid rip it and see what you can do. You got a Mississippi State team here, Will. You're going to Starkville for a noon kickoff. We know that that spot can be tricky. We've seen much better Gator teams struggle with that spot. 56-7 over Eastern Kentucky to open the season. Went on the road and lost to Kenny Dillingham's Arizona State Sun Devils by a score 30-23. And then the Toledo Rockets out of the MAC, they come down to Starkville last week and just smacked Mississippi State 41-17. So that is going to be something to keep in mind when we watch this team play Mississippi State on Saturday.
Well, so there's a couple things. I hope Blake Shapen is actually the quarterback for Mississippi State because Florida can't win against backup quarterbacks. They've now been beaten by Utah's backup quarterback, Florida State's backup quarterback, and A&M's backup quarterback the last 2 years. It turns out we make everybody look like a Heisman Trophy winner. We made Kellen
A
Mond look
lot of
awesome
highlights. A
a
lot of
few years
highlights.
ago.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, and these aren't adjusted for competition. That's absolutely true. But against FBS opponents, Mississippi State is ranked 80th on offense, 5.2 yards per play. Florida's ranked 90th. And on defense, Mississippi State Mississippi State is ranked, I had it here, hold on. 78th and Florida is 123rd. So just on a per yardage basis, Mississippi State's been a better team this year. It's in Starkville, like you said. Noon game where Florida struggles. Has always struggled with those sorts of things. Though to be honest, Florida has struggled but still won those games. So I in many ways I think those are teams that have overlooked Mississippi State and came out and were flat. The problem with Florida is they just came out flat in a must-win game against Texas A&M.
Mhm.
I mean, to get outgained 302-73 in the first half and just have that soul snatching drive at the end where A&M just handed the ball off over and over and over and over and over again. You pin them at the 1 yard line. They're like, nah, we're just going to punch in the mouth. And obviously there was the butt targeting call against Bridges and those sorts of things. But
Not a factor.
but I mean, it was the wrong call. Though the SEC said today it was the right call, but in my view, it was the wrong call. But at the same time, like you were still getting your butt kicked, regardless of whether that call was made or not.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, the only thing at this point that I'm sort of hoping for is like a miracle turnaround, like we had in 2018. I mean, it's really easy to forget now that when Dan Mullen was 6-3 in his first year with a horrible loss to Missouri, where Felipe Franks could hit the broadside of a barn. He just looked absolutely terrible. And then you had the South Carolina game that came next, and Florida was down by like 2 or 3 touchdowns in that game. Then this weird fourth down play where they got a conversion on a ball that like got tipped off. It was like a bad snap to Franks, and he ends up making the completion to Trevon Grimes, and Grimes like puts his head off of a tip, but Grimes like puts his head down and gets the first down. And from then on, Florida's offense couldn't be stopped. And it was like, oh, and they ran off 4 straight wins and wound up having a successful quote unquote 2018 season. Now that team was better than this one, and that defense was certainly better than this one. At the same time, things change quickly. So that is one thing that I think Florida fans should probably keep in mind is that Mississippi State is not A&M, Mississippi State is not Miami. And so this is an opportunity potentially for Florida to get some confidence, get healthy, and be in a situation where you're not hearing people call for your coach's firing while in the middle of the game that you're playing at home. And if you remember, Felipe Franks in that South Carolina game was shushing the fans. And so, look, Gainesville's a hard place to play when you're not playing well. All that being said, you can't lay eggs like you have against Miami and Texas A&M and expect anybody to be happy. I don't blame the fans for booing, and honestly, I don't blame the players if they're frustrated as well. You got a lot of injuries. You got a lot of depth missing. You got Slackman out with a meniscus surgery. You got Trey Wilson out with a meniscus surgery. You've got other guys on the defensive line are out. Your defensive backfield, Ace Turner's still out. There's obviously DJ Douglas struggled last week and has struggled all season long. Bridges will be back though, so maybe that gives you a little bit more reinforcement on the back end. But the problem is that and this maybe go. I went on the rant earlier about taking guys off the field. It's hard when you take one guy off the field and then somebody else makes a mistake. Like,
Mhm.
because then if you take them off the field, you got to put the guy you just yanked off back in. And when Spurrier was yanking guys in and out, it was, oh, a good quarterback missed a throw, and or a good quarterback missed a read, and we're going to teach him from that, and we're going to bring somebody in who also is a good quarterback. The problem is we've got sub-average defenders who, if you pull out that guy, you got to put another sub-average defender in, and you're not really gaining anything by doing it. I still think you need to pull guys when they blow coverages, and you still need to make sure that people are held accountable. But I get it. Like the what I said after the Miami game and what really concerns me about all this stuff is that after the Utah game last year, Billy Napier came out and said, we'll get it fixed. After the Miami game this year, Billy Napier came out and said, we'll get it fixed. Well, time to fix it is in April and May. The time to fix it is during fall camp. The time to fix it is when the transfer portal is open, and the time to fix it is when is signing day in December and February. That is when you fix the problems that we have seen on the field in the first 3 games this year, and there's not time to fix it. So all it really comes down to is, are you more physically gifted and are you able to execute a simple game plan against Mississippi State? And Florida may win this one. It'd be great. I'm not going to root against my team. I want Florida to win. At the same time, 6 points is a lot when you're going on the road. And it's not like I can't see a situation where Florida just sort of things go bad early, everything goes downhill, and we're talking about a 2-touchdown loss in Starkville, which you think it was loud after the A&M loss. Whew, just wait until that. Going into a bye week, having Central Florida coming in, and having to listen to them yap the entire time when they come in.
Yeah, that.
It's a tough time to be a Gator fan right now. Still wearing the logo all around town, but I mean, you get to a point where people are like one of the guys at church who always sees me with the Gator logo on before the season is like, you think things are going to go well? I'm like, oh, that's a tough schedule, man. I don't know. And then after the first week, he's like, what happened? Like, I was rooting for you. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. And then last week, he's like, I think it might be time for a new coach. And I'm like, I need to give you my business card so you read my blog, because I
That's
published that right before I came here. But guys who don't know anything about the program are like, I think it might be time for a new coach.
Yeah, you see Emmett Smith's out there on a show this morning saying the same thing out on ES or on what show was it? It was
It was an
I'm
on three
blanking on the
show,
show.
yeah.
Yeah, he said something about Napier being probably time. It's probably time.
Well,
So
and
it's
look, I
like
mean, so the high top guys had Andy Staples on this week, and one of the
great
things,
interview by the way. Go check that out on High Top Sports. Great
absolutely,
interview.
and that's awesome. They got somebody like Staples on, but what Staples was talking about was essentially the only reason to wait is because if you dismiss Napier before 4 games are up, then a bunch of guys can redshirt. And do you have enough guys to play? Maybe that's why the scout team needs to get better, is because Florida's going to have a bunch of
Jeez.
a bunch of guys from the scout team playing because of the transfer portal. But that's where we're at, right? I mean, basically, they got to get 2 more games because you got to get the 5th game played in order to not burn, or in order to burn a red shirt. Now, look, I mean, on an individual level, I completely understand. If you're a player who knows your coach is going to be gone, and you're a guy who's not NFL ready, and you know you're not NFL ready, then why would you burn a year on this? Right? Why would you do that? Especially given what we've talked about in terms of the team being motivated, the schemes that they're putting them in, people being held accountable. Like, if I'm a backup safety who's not getting playing time and I think I'm better than the guy they've got in front of me, and then I watch a guy blow coverage twice in a game, like,
I'd say if you're the backup safety, hold on. You might get your shot real soon. That's what
well,
I would say for the backup safety. But I see your point, and it's something to weigh and measure and consider on an individual basis. However, you can still get out there and put some film on tape. We got a lot of young guys. That was the interesting part about this roster, is that a lot of it is still so young, and they haven't, like, we saw a lot of freshmen get playing time last year. This is one of the most freshman laden rosters in the entire country. So that was the idea this coming into this season. Those freshmen got a lot of experience. They take a step forward. You get another crop of young guys coming in to supplement the roster. It just has not worked out. It's not worked out in any way, shape, or form. But I do think there's plenty of guys on this roster that probably need to put some tape together if they want to end up in a spot that they want to be in, or if they're playing for a spot. We're not going to lose every single player. You're going to lose a lot of this roster with a coaching change. You're going to lose a lot of it, but you're not going to lose everybody. So if you want to play for a spot on a roster, certainly plenty to play for.
Yeah, I mean, so I sent you an article earlier this week where it was essentially something I wrote back, I think in early 2023, and
Hmm.
it talked about strategic vision. And I'm going to repurpose a bunch of that for the eulogy for Billy Napier when he's finally let go. But the part that I sent you was something that talked about essentially the difference between building a what now is a Power Five program and building a Sun Belt or a MAC program. And for various reasons, I do think that you build those things differently. And the part that I sent you was here. I'll read it to you. It says, "At a Group of Five school, you can afford to build slowly and value culture over talent. After all, players in the recruiting range brought into those programs turn to NFL draft picks at relatively similar rates, meaning attitude, development, and projection make that a huge part of the job. But at a blue blood school, you don't have that luxury. And so fundamentally, what we've seen is a reliance on culture, a reliance on buy-in, a reliance on the idea that we're going to be together and we're going to be family. And the reunion 25 years from now is just as important as what's going on today. But what's missed in that equation is that you don't come back for a 25-year reunion from a 6-6 season or from a 4-8 season or from a 2-10 season. Like, we don't bring back the 1988 Florida Gators and have them honored for what they did. Now the 84 team finally got its due this year, but we bring
I think one of them was Mr. Two Bits last weekend.
but I yes, but he's honored because of
I
what
know
he
you
did
picked a random
individually.
year. I know you picked a random year.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
He thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. We don't honor the Jeff Driscoll team from 2013 and have a reunion for those sorts of teams where it's celebrated, because that's not the standard at Florida. And it's funny. Dan Mullen's been in the news a lot lately. He obviously has a lot of he's a bit snarky when it comes to his commentary on the Florida program.
It's
And
amazing he's had all these answers. He could have used them. He should have told himself some of these answers back in the day. It's amazing.
he should have just hired Kiffin as his offensive coordinator, so Kiffin could have told him to play Anthony Richardson. But
Why didn't he do that?
look, but I think the point that I was trying to make there is that some of those teams at least were fun, and you could think about having a reunion. But look, Kadarius Toney, not the easiest guy it seems like to integrate into a locker room. If his tenure with the New York Giants and the Kansas City Chiefs is any indication, but a damn talented player. And you think about those Swamp Kings documentaries. I guarantee you those guys didn't all get along. I guarantee it wasn't kumbaya. In fact, we heard in the 2006 season that Siler and Spikes were really at odds because Spikes didn't want to put in the work that was necessary in order to get to the level that Siler thought he needed to be at. I think all of us know Spikes is a more talented player than Siler, but Siler's the guy who goes out there and dominates in 2006, while Spikes really isn't getting on the field very much, but setting a standard for what was going to come, and where Spikes was going to have to be able to take that next step forward. Those sorts of things exist. You need tension, quite honestly, because the old quote you always hear, iron sharpens iron, all that sort of stuff. That's not like it's a Christian phrase, and it's about making people better, but you don't make the guy next to you better by telling him everything's great. You don't
Hmm.
make the guy next to you better by making it easy. In fact, it's making it hard that is what makes it worthwhile. It's making it hard that makes it to a point where you're not going to wilt. And this is one of the things I wrote this week in my post game. I didn't even bother talking about the A&M game very much. It was all just about Napier. And it would, and to me, it's that, there needs to be something difficult in order to steal you. And people talk about the Florida fan base being toxic. And yeah, there are some nuts out there who will go after the families and that sort of stuff. And I don't condone that as well, but that happens in every fan base. The Florida fan base is understands, like if you ever watched the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, he has an entire section where he's like, I didn't ask those people to do anything that I wasn't willing to do. And I think when you look at the Florida fan base, they have shown up en masse for
Mm-hmm.
3 straight years for really bad football teams and have continued to show up. And they sold out the game against A&M, and we have supported Billy Napier in every way possible. And the fact that they've already raised the buyout money allegedly is an indication that the fans are still supporting the program, right? They haven't bailed on the program. Maybe they bailed on Napier, but they haven't bailed on the program. And the point is that if you're a coach and you can't handle that, if you're a coach and you sit there and you go, this is toxic, if you're a player and you sit there and go, this is toxic, yeah, it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. And you know what? The fact that it's hard, if you're going to wilt when the fans criticize you, what's going to happen when the Georgia linebacker comes in and hits you in the mouth? What's going to happen when you throw the pick that you thought was a perfect play call and the Ohio State defensive back is so fast that he's able to recover and pick it off? What's going to happen when you're the field goal kicker and you need to make the kick at the end of the game to send your team to the playoff, but it's from 52 yards out? And knowing Billy Napier, we got a 5-yard penalty right before the attempt to push you back to 52. And you gotta hit that because you can hit it and all your team's relying on you. Some guy in the Central Florida basement who's talking about your team can bother you, but that's not good. But you won't wilt in that situation. And so I think what we're seeing here with people calling the fan base toxic is just not a it's a desire for things to be easy when the reality is stuff has to be hard at some point along the way. And we hoped that the 6-7 season the first year and the 5-7 season in the second year was the hard part that was going to steal these guys. And you know what? This year probably going to suck. But I think the guys who stay and deal with the fact that they're in the muck right now, and then you bring in a new guy to instill all of the stuff that you need to do, like this hard will be worth it at some point. But right now it really sucks.
Yeah, I'm not ready to look forward quite like that. I'm
I
not
have to
ready.
look forward like
I'm
that.
still I'm still in the muck, dude. I'm still here. I'm still here. Again, I've watched again, I got the hat, right? The For those of you listening and not watching, I'm wearing a Jacksonville Jaguars hat. I've seen this story. I've seen it over and over. It doesn't magically get better because you hire a new coach all the time. That doesn't necessarily happen. We've seen it 4 times in the last decade. And that's what, like, hey, listen, like the thing you and I have gone back and forth on behind the scenes a lot is my thing is I wanted to avoid this spot at all cost. I did not want the turnover. I was very much hoping it would work out with Napier here because you go into a very turbulent situation. We've invested 3 years into this guy now. I wanted this to work. I wanted this to work, but it is so bad. You cannot ignore that. Not only is it not, it's not that it's staying kind of the same. The thing you said before the season, Will, that I did agree with is you wanted clarity out of this season, right? One way or
Oh,
the
did we
other.
get it?
We had it. We had it in the first half of the Miami game, man. And we've just been spoon fed more of it. And the one little bright spot we had, we're like, yeah, we're gonna give that guy half the attempts. Like again, even the Lagway thing. You get this, that's your wild card, and that's your home run hitter, and you're gonna give him half of the at bats. You're gonna give your home run hitter half of the at bats. And I just again, the defense is such a mess. That's not even why there was a problem on Saturday. There's 100 different reasons why there's problems, but that's just to me. It's more symbolic of you know maybe a stubbornness, maybe a stubbornness and unwillingness to adjust. That you're going to be the guy that knows better on every single front. You're going to be wrong some of the time, just like the fans are wrong some of the time. we both were highly critical of Graham Mertz coming into last season. He had a nice season. He wasn't as good as some people make it out to be, but it was good. It was much better than his Wisconsin days. It was significant improvement, and you got to give Napier credit on that one. That was, and by the way, I kept joking last year. I remember the line I had last year was the only thing worse than the idea of Graham Mertz coming in would be the idea of a season without Graham Mertz last season. That would have been real rough if he wasn't here last season. So I think he got a lot out of Graham Mertz, but I think it's time to move on. And I think it's time to go in a different direction. And you need a guy in there that could put up 40 potentially. And I'm not saying Lagway's that guy right now. I'm not saying that offense is ready to do that. That offensive line is just getting beaten to shreds. We talk about how bad the defensive fronts, but really both lines of scrimmage have just been terrible. Like we've got some nice parts. We had the receivers, flashy receivers during the Napier tenure. We've seen Lagway certainly has that potential at quarterback. We're not blocking anybody up front on the offensive side of the ball. That's killing the run game, which Napier did talk about this week, where that's really the thing that makes the engine go, he said. And we are not effective in the run game for the first time really in the Napier era. I know last season the ground game wasn't as strong as it was in year one, but we've not seen it quite this bad.
Yeah, so the Mertz and Napier, I guess, pathways or story arcs are really similar when you think about it, right? Which is that, Mertz was good enough to have a 6-6 season or a 5-7 season last year. He was good enough to sort of meet the high end of what we thought was possible. It's interesting if you actually go back and look at an article I wrote before the season started. I sort of laid out probabilities, like what like most likely he's going to replicate what he did at Wisconsin. But if he does really well, these are what his stats will look like. And it turns out that's almost exactly what his stats looked like.
Mm-hmm.
So good for him, right? To be able to get to that point. The problem is that what we've seen is that as they've tried to make him not that Graham Mertz, as they've tried to push downfield, he's reverted back into Wisconsin Graham Mertz, which is turnovers, inaccuracy down the field, ineffective down the field. And really what it boils down to is you are right. We have no idea whether DJ Lagway can be the guy who can put up 40 points per game. But we are absolutely certain that it's not Graham Mertz in this offense with the personnel around him to be that guy. And that's why you make the change. And that's why I wanted certainty when it came to the head coaching job this year. Is what I didn't want to do is go, he sort of I would have loved it if Billy Napier went 10-2. Like I was rooting for him. I want the team to do well. Quite honestly, people are always like, "Oh, you're just fighting for clicks or being negative." We get way more clicks when Florida wins. Like the most reads we got last year.
We also enjoy it a hell of a lot more too. It's a lot more fun to do this stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I think people think that there's like that being negative is good for business. It's not. Like, I mean, it is in this case because everybody sort of agrees with you at this point. But being negative when everybody wants you to be positive, it doesn't give you a whole lot of clicks. Whatever. You guys don't really care about the business of this side anyway. But my point is that I wanted him to do well. But I think we're at the exact same point that I said with Mertz, which is that I don't know if the next head coach that Florida brings in
Yeah.
will be able to win SEC and national championships
But
or
we
be
know
able
what
to
this looks
return Florida to glory. But I know Billy Napier can't.
Yeah.
And so everybody who goes back and goes, well, Dan Mullen won a bunch of games. We were at that exact same point with Mullen. He had flirted with the NFL. The locker room was toxic, and he wouldn't replace Todd Grantham. He wouldn't replace John Hevesy. He wouldn't switch from Emory Jones to Anthony Richardson. Lost the locker room, and everything went downhill. And we didn't know, like, we knew that Dan Mullen could win 10 games, could win maybe even 11 games. In this playoff situation, maybe we'd be the 10th to 12th seed every year. But what we knew was he wasn't going to win SEC and national championships, at least not consistently. And here's the deal. You know how I know that? Because I went back before the season and I looked at statistical markers for SEC championship coaches. None of the 14 coaches who won an SEC championship since 1990 had a losing record over their first 3 seasons aggregate. Only 2 of the 14 coaches had one season below 500. That was Tommy Tuberville and Mike DeBose in their year one. Not the stars of the SEC, right? These guys won SEC championships, but not the stars. The average time to win an SEC championship was 2.9 seasons. 12 out of the 14 won the SEC title within 3 years, and Tuberville and Fulmer were the only guys who took longer than 3 years. And Fulmer took longer than 3 years because he was being absolutely just terrorized by Steve Spurrier, who was winning the SEC championship every year. So, all this to say that even if Florida went out and got a Phil Fulmer type guy who could win an SEC championship every once in a while, and Kirby's the Steve Spurrier in this whole endeavor, that's not probably good enough for Florida fans long term. But man, is it better than what's going on right now? So we will know. The average record for those coaches who won SEC championships in year one was 8-4. Not fantastic, right? 8-4. But that jumped to 11 and 2, or 10.6 and 2.5 in year two, and 10.4 and 2.9 in year three. So basically, you're winning 10 or 11 games in year two, or year two and year three if you're an SEC championship caliber coach. And so coming into year three, we kind of knew that Billy Napier was not an SEC championship caliber coach. But after the first 3 games, we absolutely know. And so again, it's exactly what I said about Mertz is I don't know whether Lagway can be the fantastic player that we need him to be in order to win this year. But I know that Graham Mertz isn't that guy. And, like you said, if it was the Alabama team with Jake Coker at quarterback and you had Graham Mertz in there, yeah. If it was the year, Blake Sims when Alabama had that guy in there, sure. Maybe he could win that. Even maybe some of the Texas teams where you had like Colt McCoy and those sorts of guys.
I'm looking for more like Northwestern examples. You keep throwing Alabama examples out. You got any like Central Michigan or Northwestern examples
Well, I mean, I
on
will
that?
say that there's, I mean, Wisconsin
Indiana,
did.
come on, man. I know you got Indiana background.
How many games did Mertz win at Wisconsin? Like they weren't below 500 every year he was there, right?
They had some. That's when it started trending downhill. Paul Chris lost his job, so they haven't recovered from that time period yet. And
So I
part of
mean,
the problem there at Wisconsin is they were slow to adapt. Slow to adapt. Same story here. And look at the at the end of the day here, Will. I think the legacy of the Billy Napier era is going to be that just the slow to adapt part of it is you could say that in game, you could say that off the field, on the field, off the field. He came in, he was the guy with the plan. You heard he's got the binders that are this thick, it's super thick binders. He's got a plan for everything, how they tie their shoes and every last thing. College football changed dramatically in the last 3 years. And you needed a guy that can, yeah, he's been studying for 15 years for what to be. And if he became a head coach and what his program's going to look like down to the last detail, that's great. Unfortunately, the sport changed entirely, and he just was not ready to go that speed that fast. And not just him, but our program wasn't ready to adapt. The whole thing took too long to get up and running. And I think you wore down the patience. And then on top of that, the messaging, which is also something I think that maybe you can explore a little more about. But the messaging to the public it's been terrible. It's been terrible that you sit there game after game, you get beat up, and you want to hear your coach say something a little honest to you. And instead, we get the same cliches over and over again. It feels very political to me, which, I don't care if you vote left or right. Uh, Politics right now is not really fun for anyone right now. So it's really just you just constantly feel like you're being, sold this like, well, here's a cool new video this week. And it's like, okay, we just got crushed. Like, I'm glad that things are going well behind the scenes. I'm glad everybody's happy, but the point of Florida football is to win games. That has to be the main focus of the program at the end of the day. We can do a lot of things well. If we're not winning games, we're not living up to the purpose of the program. That sounds like such a basic takeaway, but it seems like a point that's being missed by the current group in charge here because it seems like they got everything else. It seems like it's going, or at least they're telling us it's going well behind the scenes. Who knows? That could be a total mess too. We just don't get to see it. We see
Well,
what they put on the field on Saturdays.
so again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is so first off, I thought Billy Napier was going to be a good hire. You looked at his profile at
Love
Louisiana.
the vision.
There
Love
there
the
were
vision he
there
came in
there were
with.
there was some red flags in terms of one score games, playing down to
Hmm.
competition at Louisiana, those sorts of things. But he took Louisiana from sort of a mid conference recruiting team to a we are recruiting at the top level in the Sun Belt. And so that was the expectation, right? Is that okay? Florida's been recruiting at a mid level, and he's going to be able to recruit at that level, like minimum. He's bringing in this army. He's gotten all the promises that he needs from the UAA, from Scott Strickland, from the boosters and the people who need to support what he needs. Okay. The problem to me, we can talk about slow to adjust and we can talk about the way college football is changing and all sorts of stuff. Being a cover three team and actually being able to cover in cover three has nothing to do with the transfer portal, has nothing to do with recruiting, quite honestly, and has nothing to do with what's going bad with this team, right? This team right now on the defensive side of the ball is doing things that are like first day install type mistakes that are out there on display for everybody to see. Just busted coverage after busted coverage after busted coverage. How many times do we see guys just running free behind Florida's defense? Not because they were beaten physically, but because they were beaten mentally, right? Because they weren't in the right place. They didn't know what their assignment was. They didn't trust their teammate, all those sorts of things. And if you're going to build a team based on culture, right? I mean, look, slow to adapt, needed to adapt, all that stuff can be true. But even so, if you're going to build a team the old school way and you're going to say that culture is important, then your guys shouldn't be getting beat mentally. And I go back to the overarching theme of the Billy Napier era is a lack of strategic vision. When he came in, the reason I loved the first couple of press conferences is he goes, "This is a talent acquisition business." And if you remember, after Texas A&M brought in the number one class, Nick Saban went out there and ticked off Jimbo Fisher by
Hmm.
saying Texas A&M bought that class. They bought it, and he basically made it sound like it was dirty, even though it was NIL at that
You should
point.
go dig into some of the stuff Nick Saban's doing.
But
That
you
Jimbo
know, but
Fisher
you,
press conference after was an all
but you,
timer.
but you know what the message really was from Saban? It was to his boosters. It was they beat you. Come on, do you want to let Texas A&M beat you? Because they beat you. They didn't beat me. They beat you. You need to contribute. And when Florida started losing in the NIL space, Billy Napier came out and said, "We're not going to get into any bidding wars." And that sent the opposite message to the people that he needed to align. That sent a message of it's okay to lose. It's okay that our boosters and our NIL program is getting beaten by all these other people. And if it's a talent acquisition business and you're getting beat on talent acquisition, then you damn well better be the best football coach out there. And right now, we can't run a basic cover three defense. And so, I mean, Bud Davis had a tweet today, I think it was, that it was like Florida's a cover three defense or is a predominantly cover three defense that doesn't play cover three well. And he cited a bunch of different statistics that looked at that. Again, I just go to it if like if the strategic vision is culture, if the strategic vision is we're not going to bid for players, if the strategic vision is that we're going to outthink people on the field, even if we don't have the same physical gifts, I disagree with that vision, but at least it's coherent. The problem is that the strategic vision is it's a talent acquisition business, but we're not willing to pay for talent. We're everything's great behind the scenes. Like I didn't see this performance coming, but every time we come out on the field, we just get beat. And then afterwards, like, well, the scout team needs to do a better job. Like, no, I don't think the scout team's the problem. I think the problem is that these guys don't know where to be, or they're ignoring where they should be, and no one's holding them accountable to know and to be where they need to be. And so the defense is going to be ranked 100th because that's what happens.
Because that that line all offseason about it can't get worse on defense was a joke. Just for like that was a joke when we were saying it. It just turned out to be true, but we were joking when we were hoping it was a joke anyway when we were saying it. But um,
Oof.
yeah, tough times, man, tough times. But that's like I think you look at we're going to be able to do the full post-mortem at some point here. It's still got a little bit of time left, but well,
Got a few more weeks to do it.
beyond the field though, beyond the field, where are we as a program? Because there's a lot of talk. Because I think for the average fan, it's probably a little confusing. There's a lot of talk about the president. There's a lot of talk about Strickland. There's a lot of talk about the booster situation. Like, where do you see Florida as a fit in major college football? Like, are we are we capable of outbidding a Texas for a player that Texas wants? I would think on paper most Florida fans would feel like we would be able to go toe to toe with a school like Texas, but was this a choice in the recent years to hold ourselves back a little bit, or are we really like facilities were behind? What's the story across the board? Do you feel like off the field? Because the story with Napier coming in was he's going to get the full support he needed. Well, the facility project was underway, perhaps 15 years too late, but it was underway already when Napier came in, so that wasn't like a new addition. You do have some high profile recruits that ended up coming through the door in Alagway or McCray in the last class. Of course, you lost 8 guys at the last minute too. We've lost a lot of head-to-head battles with schools like Miami, and of course Georgia's still on a roll too. You got a couple of those going on, but where do you view Florida as a program in the NIL era, especially now that we're looking to maybe blow this thing up again and start all over? Where do you view us at the moment?
Well, so there's a couple things. There's blowing it all up and starting over can mean two different things, right? It can mean a new head coach. It can mean new athletic director. It can mean new people in charge within the UAA. And I think that's where some of the heat has been coming recently is those people. And I think you got to make a determination into I would definitely say that there has been some strategic misalignment within the Florida program, but that's not unique to Florida. There are a lot of places where there's strategic misalignment. I think there is certainly a place now in college football for a general manager. The reason I say that is that you in the NFL you have a general manager who knows how to structure contracts that fit within the collective bargaining agreement within the NFL.
Mhm.
That is not something that most head coaches who want to concentrate on football are experts at. Bill Belichick had people to help him in New England, but he understood the concepts well enough to be able to figure out how to finagle the different contracts he needed. And it turned out he also had the best quarterback probably of all time, and so that helps things too. So what that means though to me is that the general manager is a different position than the NFL because there's no salary cap right now in college football. You have to know how to value the players based on market conditions, right? So if you can't be giving Jaden Rashada $14 million, but a guy like DJ Lagway, given the market, might be worth that. You got to expect that since you don't have contracts that are really enforceable because it's NIL, that the transfer portal is going to be a risk. So, how do you treat the players? How do you make sure your NIL deals are structured to disincentivize people from leaving? Those are all things that a general manager can do. However, college football and the way college football is set up is still run by the personality at the head coaching position, right? The talent acquisition process, who is going to be on the field, who's going to play, who they're going to go after, building those relationships and recruiting, that is all still at the head coach position. And so you can have a head coach like Kevin Stefanski for the Cleveland Browns, who I'm not sure I could tell you who he was if he was walking down the street. And the general manager is out there. And if he's doing a good job, the Browns might be really, really good. Now, look, the Browns have made some mistakes with Deshaun Watson, and that may set them back. But
Yeah,
I think, but if
need the Jaguars on Sunday. No,
well,
that's not the show for this. Yeah.
but I guess my point is that whenever things aren't going well, you're going to have misalignment. right? It's really easy for the cracks and the fissures to show up when things aren't going well, or when you don't have a strong personality to drive people into alignment. Like, I almost think of like the college head coach as a magnetic field, right? That if you put something in a magnetic field, everything moves in alignment with that magnetic field. And a strong head coach can do that. And so there's been a lot of talk of Lane Kiffin, and the biggest argument I would say in Kiffin's case has nothing to do with his offense, has nothing to do with what he's doing at Ole Miss specifically. To me, it's a personality thing where he has the ability, hopefully, if he's the guy that Florida chooses, and if they decide to get rid of Billy Napier, obviously. But if somebody like that came in, that he would be a magnetic force to be able to align everything, right? And that if there were people in the way who are saying, well, we actually need this money for facilities, and it needed to go to NIL, that Kiffin has the buy-in, or whoever the new head coach is has the buy-in to be able to go to the booster and go, don't listen to that schmuck, give me the money. And if the coach can do that, because see, the thing is, the general manager in pro football only has to satisfy the owner. He's got it. Like the Chiefs general manager has to go to Clark Hunt, ask for money. The
Mm-hmm.
Cowboys general manager, who is Jerry Jones or Stephen Jones, has to go to Jerry Jones to ask for money. That's his customer. When you're a college head coach or even a college GM, your customer is the boosters. Your customer is the entity that you have to go to help fund the NIL, to help fund the facilities, to help fund the the buyouts and all those sorts of things when you need them. Like, that's your constituency. Those are your customers. That's who you need to make happy. So what I think is really sort of the issue that we see right now is that neither Billy Napier or Scott Strickland are really interested in making that set of people happy. And when you're not able to make that set of people happy, then the funds don't get allocated to you. So, like, if Billy Napier went and asked a booster today for millions of dollars for a 5-star prospect, what's the booster going to tell him? You go, well, I'm gonna wait for the next guy to tell me where that money's gonna go, is what he would say. So to me, that's the thing, right? Is I think there is an enormous amount of value in bringing an NFL type thinking to your front office, but it is a different business model. And if you try to treat it like an NFL business model, I think you're going to be disappointed. Now, look, 2 or 3 years from now, there might be revenue sharing. There might be a collective bargaining agreement. It might be much more like the NFL model. And we saw what happened with Tennessee this week, where they announced they were going to put a 10% NIL fee on their
Talent fee.
tickets.
A talent fee.
And
That's a
look,
great name
I,
for
I
that.
get I get that people kind of think of that as distasteful, but let's be honest. When you go watch an Indianapolis Colts game or a Jacksonville Jaguars game or whatever, you're paying for the players when you buy that ticket. Just like when I go to a rock concert with my son, we're paying the guitarist for playing. Like, and I don't sit there and go, "Oh, how dare they charge me for coming to see the guitarist?" Like, if the guitarist wasn't there, I wouldn't go. Or I'm not paying to go into the venue.
Yeah, the reality is the cost is getting passed along. So
Absolutely.
anything you see, it looks like progress in a way, but the school's going to pass that cost along.
Sure.
Yeah.
And honestly, from a business perspective, they probably should. Now, the one thing I will say, and I think this is something at upper levels that makes some sense because I feel it too, is I do find it distasteful that the university rakes in all the TV money and none of that money gets allocated to the
Yep.
players. And
Yep.
so I can understand why there would be people at high levels who are saying, "Look, you're soaking me to help pay these players and bring them in when you've got this giant fund over here. I will wait until that money gets allocated to those players." And in many ways, that might end up being the internal battle in college football in many different programs is, do we wait for for everything to settle down before we organize? Or do we go ahead and organize around what the rules are today, understanding they might change tomorrow? And that is the complication, right? That if you go make a change at head coach today, and a year from now you have a completely different structure in college football, then you have to have someone who's willing to adapt. And last year at early signing day, I actually titled my post early signing day article "Adapt or Die," which was a tweet that Lane Kiffin had sent out after early signing day. And it's not a coincidence that guy adapted to his to his limitations. And you look at his recruiting, and it's better than it was under the previous administration there at Ole Miss, but it is not Alabama or LSU or even Florida level. But what he did was he decided to go hard and early at the transfer portal and get the players he wanted. And we'll see whether it pays off for him. I don't know whether it will, but I think that general attitude. Look, I mean, Billy Napier said scared money don't make money. Billy Napier said this is a talent acquisition business. And so adapt or die is a great catchphrase until things change and you refuse to adapt and everything goes down the drain.
If
But at least to me, that attitude is what anybody who comes into any program is going to have, whether it's general manager, whether it's a new AD, whether it's a new head coach, whether it's new people in the UAA, they're going to have an adapt or die attitude. And anybody who doesn't have that attitude, there's going to have to be someone with that attitude with a strong enough personality to drag them along.
And in fairness to Napier, scare money don't make money. It's been absolutely true. It's been absolutely true. We've
Not in
had
the way we would have liked.
some of the scariest money. It's been some of the scariest money that we've been playing with here.
Dude, that's the
So
disappointing part. Like I went on a rant on Gators Breakdown a couple weeks ago, and I said Wisconsin instead of Tennessee, but I meant Tennessee in 2022. I was so
that
excited.
game, he coached that. That was a well coached game. I'll stand
I
by that one. That was a good
I
game.
was so excited to see what he did in that game because it was like, you talked about the binder. It was all right. Some of those 2-point conversions didn't work out, but the 2-point conversions didn't work out, but they were the right call. And he kept doing it. And he went after the win in a way that Dan Mullen didn't do, and he went after the win in a way that Will Muschamp certainly wouldn't do, and that Jim McElwain wouldn't do. And Florida still ends up losing that game. But I had a chart in that article, and it was basically that he added 13.3% in win probability to the Florida ledger. So you look at that and go, there's no moral wins. But Florida still, they end up losing by 5 points, and he's given them a 13% better chance of winning by making decisions. So, he went for it on 4th and 1. He went for it on 4th and 2. He went for it on 4th and 9. He went on it from a 4th and 1. He went on it for a 4th and 11 at midfield. He went 4th and 2 from the Tennessee 13, 4th and 2 from the Florida 27, 4th and 1 from the Florida 39. Like this was not like, oh, I'm at the 41 and it's 4th and 5 and I'm going to punt to pin them deep. This was my defense is terrible. I know it's terrible. I have Anthony Richardson at quarterback. I'm going to ride Anthony Richardson. Now, you could make the argument that he knows right now he doesn't have Anthony Richardson at quarterback, but I am unsympathetic to that argument because I think he's leaving win probability on the field. Now, look, when you get beat by 40 points or 30 points or whatever it's been the last couple of weeks, win probability added by coaching decisions doesn't really make that big
There's
of
a
a
reason we
difference.
didn't spend a ton of time discussing Texas A&M. Well,
Yeah.
we moved on quickly from that.
But what it suggests is that, at least in that Tennessee game, the thing that encouraged me so much was that he was looking for the edge. He was looking for, how do I give my team an edge that pushes them over the top against a team that, quite frankly, has more talent than his does. And I can't think of another time on the field, and certainly I can't identify a time off the field where Florida has found an edge. The only place you might be able to say was Cormani McLean coming over this year as a walk-on, preferred walk-on, and so you don't use a scholarship on a player because you've got an NIL deal in place. I think that's going to be more commonplace in the not too distant future in many ways, just because you don't use a roster spot that way. So you get a guy who's a transfer through NIL, and you can bring in a guy through high school recruiting because you don't have to share that roster spot and that scholarship spot. That might end up being an edge. But other than that, I can't think of any place where Florida has gained an edge over somebody since that Tennessee game. And that's just that is the era. That's the Napier era it started out with a bang, the win against Utah. Even the loss against Tennessee, I felt great about the direction of the program. And then the last year, it's just been, the recruiting fell apart, the buy-in from the fans fell apart, and obviously 2 of the last 3 weeks, the team has just fallen apart and gotten beaten pretty badly. And so hopefully they'll be able to get back on track against Mississippi State. But the problem with the Mississippi State game is it doesn't really change the narrative. It just sort of prolongs the narrative until we play a team that's better than Mississippi State, because, I think we all know what's coming on the back end of the schedule.
Well, noon Saturday, kicking off in Starkville. We'll have those cowbells going. Really, your best shot at an SEC win on the rest of the schedule here. So really, really big game for the Gators in that sense on Saturday. Hopefully we don't see something that's very similar to last week. We'll see something new. But just a quick announcement for next week. We're not going to be doing a show next week. A little bit of conflicts there, just not going to work out for recording, but we will be back the week before UCF. So just a heads up, we won't be recording right after the Mississippi State game, but we'll have that. Of course, it's the bye week, so we'll have a Mississippi State recap after that bye week there. But Patreon, we have been posting picks available to the public. You can join our Patreon as a free member, or if you're so inclined, you can support us on Patreon. Will does post-game recaps. I know one of the conflicts we have. I don't believe you're doing a post-game recap after Mississippi State, correct, Will?
It'll be up late. Usually it's right after the
Late.
game, about 10 minutes after the game. I do a post game recap. My son has a baseball doubleheader this
Yep.
weekend, so I'm actually not going to watch the Mississippi State game as it happens. So I'll have to come back, watch the game. We'll have something up there late on Saturday night. And then obviously my article on Sunday morning. And, Nick, you won't be able to do a stand up and holler next week, but there'll be, I'm planning on doing something. I got a new monitor that's got touchscreen capabilities, so I'm working on doing some film stuff. So if you want to check that out, I'll probably have a free one up on Read and Reaction this week after the Mississippi State game. But then after that, we'll throw that behind the Patreon because that's a little bit extra.
All right. And yeah, Patreon, just search Read and Reaction, obviously, on that. And we'll tweet out a link to the picks tomorrow. We usually tweet that out on Fridays. So I believe it's up now, but we'll tweet it out on Friday, which this episode's probably going to be posted Friday, Will. So today, I
There you
should
go.
say. All right, Gators, hang in there. Hang in there. It's another week. It's such a bummer in game 3 of the season to be talking like this, Will, by the way. We should be just enjoying just getting in the groove here with football season, and it's we've never had to do this early. So this is brutal. This is brutal, but it's still football. Love football season. Hang in there, Gators, and let's beat the Bulldogs. Go have a great weekend, everybody, and go Gators.
Go Cal.
Tallahassee.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Stand Up and Holler. If you're interested in more information from me and Nick, you can go over to readandreaction.com. You can like and subscribe our YouTube channel here at Read and Reaction, or you can go to patreon.com/readandreaction to support us, get extra information, and we do Ask Anythings over there every once in a while as well. So check us out. Thanks for listening.